This is Camper Cooking with Chef Paul. We are Americans living in France who have always liked camping and eating well. Like many of you, we bought a camping car after the first pandemic lockdown so we could still travel safely. Chef Paul does most of the food prep at home so we can have more time to explore. He will show you how a classically trained chef prepares great food even with a camper's minimal kitchen, utilizing historical and modern techniques.
Hello, I want to make some onion soup. So I've got my 3-rabbit pot out, and I don't think I want to use clarified butter. I'm going to use whole butter, and a lot of it. So I'm going on medium-low heat here. Here I've got a big bag of local Alsatian onions. But I'm going to use the last of whatever I had before, which were probably Alsatian as well. Nothing wrong with a little variety. So I've got a bunch of onions to chop. Yes. So you see here how this one's, it's really not rotting, it's just a little over mature. There'd be nothing wrong with that in the soup, but I'm also making stock. So every time you see me go off to the right, you think I'm going in the garbage can, but I'm actually going into a stock pot. See, I have here most of a chicken, and then I'm just adding my onion scraps, and I'll look in the fridge and see if I have some celery and carrot scraps I can add in there as well. All my onion peels will go in there. Any part of the onion that I don't want, unless it's green like that, that's garbage. But all the onion peels can go in. And I have plenty of onions, so I don't mind that I took an extra layer here, because that's just going to go make my stock better. And see how that's not very pretty. So we'll get down to a prettier layer, because I can afford to be discriminating when I have this many onions and I'm making stock, so I don't feel bad about wasting anything. I like to use a variety of onions and shallots. These are mostly white onions, which works best for me. You can also use Bermuda, which are red onions, or Vidalia, which are sweet onions. But 2/3 of your mix should be white or yellow onions, or the soup will be too sweet. The caramelization process makes the soup sweet enough. Here my butter's starting to bubble a little. I did give up and turn up the heat a little. So even though it's not entirely melted, I'm going to be caramelizing these onions. Because I'm caramelizing these onions, I need that butter to keep that sizzle is more than I wanted. So I'm going to go down to medium-low heat. I don't want these to brown off too fast. I want them to caramelize slowly so I can bring out all the natural sugars. You could peel the onions and slice them with a food processor, and that's the way a lot of restaurants make this soup. But slicing them by hand with a sharp knife is a much better way to do it because the machine will bruise and tear the onions, which releases a lot of fluids from ruptured cell walls. Adding this much moisture at the beginning of the cooking process interferes with the caramelization process, and you end up poaching the onions and their own juices instead of gently browning them. If you slice onions the way I do, cutting them in half first, you'll find that they're one of the easiest vegetables to slice, and it's good practice for your knife skills. One of the hardest things about caramelizing onions is having the patience not to overstir. But I want a pretty deep layer of onions here. I always used to call this French onion soup. But here in France, they just call it onion soup. Actually, they call it soupe oignon. But, you know, they call a door just a door. It's not a French door. Or French toast is pain perdu. And French fries are just fries. By the way, I think they were actually invented in Belgium. I don't think French fries are actually even French, although the French certainly eat a fair share of them. Now, I could slice the onions like this and make little semicircles, little half rings. But I don't like the way they look on a spoon as much. I like the little juliennes, is what we always call them. Little strips. I think they look nicer on the spoon. Now I have no pretense of getting this finished today because it's already 4:30, 5 o'clock. But I don't heat my kitchen, so I may turn it down a little, cook super low all night, and then turn it back up and resume in the morning, or I may even just turn it off.
But there are sons who have lost mothers, and mothers who have lost sons. So, we must live the best life we can.
I miss the sweet onions we used to get in the South. I found them once or twice here, and they're good with something like this mixed in with these white onions, just to add a little layer of flavor. Home stretch now, boys. Sadly, we're not done making a mess.
We must live the best life we can.
If you can't find shallots easily, don't bother. It's not that big of a deal. Just use more garlic. That toad's looking a little green. So, one will be enough. About 1 and some change. I'm peeling the garlic now. We'll probably go ahead and slice it, but I don't want to add it to my onions until they're pretty much on their way to being caramelized, because garlic will get bitter if it's overcooked. Now these I will cut into semicircles, half rings. They're smaller, so they're not going to bother me on a soup spoon. And I'm going to go even thin. I don't always even chop this for soup. Sometimes I just smash it and just let it cook down. And sometimes I get a big mouthful of garlic and I don't mind. I didn't get much further on day one of this project. It can certainly be done in one day, probably around 8 hours total. But this is a good place to pause if you want to take a break. It was getting late, so I went and had a well-deserved cry. Mostly because of all those onions, but a little bit because I'm not allowed to go camping in the middle of a pandemic. The onions had just started picking up color before I turned off the stove and went to bed. Here I am the next morning, well, really all the next day. Cooking the onions slowly in a heavy pan with lots of butter allows them to caramelize nicely. There are some shortcuts to get the color you want, but there are no shortcuts for getting the amazing flavor that comes from doing this slowly. Okay, I think that's about dark enough. Let a little Vin de Bordeaux. We're actually using chicken stock here. Beef stock would be more traditional. But I don't have any right now. A small handful of bay leaves. I can turn my heat up to medium now, and we're going to let this cook for quite a while and reduce. Black pepper. More black pepper. A little bit of cayenne. And I'm resisting the temptation to add salt now until this soup is reduced. And just ignore my dinner over here. That's for me. I'll share the soup. Well, the soup's done. Off camera, I found a lamb bone and dropped it in. Just add a little flavor. You see it's plenty dark, and all of that came from caramelization of the onions. We call those melanoidins when you get that caramelly flavor. This came out really good. I didn't have to adjust the seasoning at all. I did end up dropping a few beef bouillon cubes in here just to give it a little more depth. And I had it for lunch, and the primary flavor is actually caramel. And it's really good. So now what I'm going to do is finish up and work on canning it. So you see, I've got my big boiler going back here. This is my leftover chicken stock. Really, it's chicken and onion stock. I've got some jars washed over here. So just to make myself a little more room, let's see how far I get with the chicken stock. I'll go ahead and can that, and most of the onion soup. So I'm just going to strain my hot stock into the soup. It's already been strained once. It's pretty good form to just strain stuff every time you move it. Okay, and this little bit will just go right there. I'll tell you, there's a real steep learning curve for me, learning how to use these French jars. And one thing I'm realizing is I don't think I can get 3 in that. I thought I could. Of course, back in the States, I had the right kind of tongs for picking up jars. But I haven't learned enough about how to use these European jars yet for that to be a lot of value to me. If any of you have any better advice for me about how to get these silicone gaskets on these European style canning jars, I would love to hear it, because I struggle with these. I feel like I fight it so hard that I have to re-sterilize everything. And I wish I could tell you I knew a magic trick for not making a mess doing this, but I don't. And the rest of this will have to become clear for the next few days. And I don't want to put the lid right on this soup, because I want it to cool. It'll sour. It could sour if I don't do it properly. Jar is covered. Put the pressure cooking lid on it. For 10 minutes should be good. Close the valve. Actually, I always feel safer going 20 minutes. So I'll let this one function as the timer for both of them. The other one has chicken and onion stock, so that should be good. I already picked my chicken off camera. That's one of those things that gets easier as I get older. Mostly because I'm not as poor as I was, and I used to have to pick the chicken for every little piece of meat. And now it can be a little more discriminating. But that'll be set aside. I can make soup or stir fry or chicken salad or who knows what I feel like later in the week. Chicken salad actually sounds good. So we'll see. I'll check back with you in about half an hour. I've let these cool off about an hour, but they're still holding pressure. There's plenty of time. So I'm just going to at least watch for these little things to pop down. That was good. I'll let that cool off so I can get them out without burning myself. You know, it's middle of December, late December, so I'm actually kind of happy to have the heat now. So I guess unlike the jars I'm used to in America, these, I have to undo the clasp and make sure that the lid doesn't make sure I have that seal. But again, if somebody understands these better than I did, please let me know. The American ones you have, of course, have that metal lid and it's dimpled, and I know it's full of vacuum. And it took me a while to figure out how to open these jars as well. Now I know, after you undo the clasp, you pull that silicone tab and eventually it breaks the seal. So that's 3 onions, chicken and onion stocks. Well, you can tell just how hard the water is here. After those cool and dry a little bit, I'll put labels on them and take them down to the cob. That's that cold place in the basement where I keep wine. So I'm just frying sliced baguette, homemade of course, and some clarified butter. Because I need a couple of croutons. Okay, so got my soup. I'll float a crouton on the top. This was labeled as Le Croûte. This is pretty obviously Munster. It's a nice stinky cheese. That's how soup is done here. It is with Munster. It's not with Swiss cheese or provolone. Maybe you can put a little Parmesan on it, but that's not how it's done here. But it's okay. Whatever white cheese you want to put on the top of it, fine. Have at it.